She woke that morning before the sun had risen, long before the birds had begun their timid morning chatter. Her eyes opened to the familiar ceiling, the same cracks, the same quiet shadow of the curtain swaying slightly in the breeze. The room was silent, but not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that wraps itself around the heart, heavy and unyielding. Her name was Mara, and exhaustion had become her closest companion. Not the kind of exhaustion sleep could heal, but the kind that came from holding life together with invisible threads, threads that frayed more each day. She pushed the blanket aside and sat up slowly, feeling the weight of her own body. Her thoughts immediately returned to the worries that had become routine. The job she'd lost 3 months ago. The friend who had promised to stay, but quietly slipped out of her life when things became too uncomfortable. The relationship that had crumbled when she most needed someone to lean on. The future that now looked more like a blank wall than a road. She went to the tiny bathroom and splashed water on her face. She avoided the mirror, because she already knew what she'd see: tired eyes, a forced expression of strength, a woman trying to convince herself she hadn't lost hope entirely. She had once been someone who prayed every morning. Not out of obligation, but out of love. She used to speak to God as easily as breathing. Her faith was not loud, not dramatic, just steady. A quiet trust. But heartbreak, disappointment, and the feeling of being abandoned had dried up her prayers. She still believed, but believing had begun to feel lonely. In the kitchen, she poured hot water over tea leaves and sat at the table. She watched the steam rise, then fade. She didn't drink it, she just stared. Her chest ached. Emotionally, not physically. A silent tightening, like her heart was being held by something unseen. God, she whispered, barely audible. I don't know if you still see me. But I don't know what else to do. Nothing happened. No warmth. No sudden light. No answered voice. Just the quiet. She exhaled shakily. Maybe this was just how life would be now. Quiet, heavy, and uncertain. After a long while, she stood, grabbed her old coat and bag, and stepped outside. The air was cold but clean, the kind that stung the lungs slightly when drawn in. The sky was pale, brushed with the early hints of daylight. She walked slowly down the street, shoes scuffing lightly against the pavement. The town around her was waking up in small ways, bakeries turning on their ovens, lights flicking on in shop windows, a cyclist passing by with a sleepy expression. Yet she felt separate from it all, like a spectator in a world she no longer felt part of. She walked without knowing where she was going. She just needed to move. As she passed Field Street, the warm scent of bread drifted through the air. She almost kept walking. She had no desire for food, no urge to stop, but something caught her eye. An older man was sitting alone on a wooden bench outside the bakery. His coat was thin, worn at the elbows, and his hands were trembling as he held them close to his chest for warmth. His gaze was distant, unfocused, as though he had long gotten used to being overlooked. Mara slowed her steps. She didn't have much. She barely had enough to make it through the week. Spending anything extra was irresponsible. Her mind said keep walking. But her heart did not. A small, barely there whisper rose inside her. Not loud, not forceful, but steady. Do something kind. She hesitated. She could ignore it. She could rationalize. She could pretend she didn't notice him. But she had always been someone who cared deeply, even when it hurt. So she stepped into the bakery. The warmth inside was comforting. And for a moment, she simply stood there, breathing it in. She counted her money carefully as she approached the counter. It wasn't much, just enough for a warm bread roll and a small cup of soup. She bought them. Stepping outside, she held the food in both hands, the heat seeping into her palms. For a moment, she wondered what she should say. But when the man looked up, his eyes tired and glassy, words weren't necessary. She simply offered. His hands trembled as he took the food. Not with hunger, though surely there was hunger, but with emotion. As though he couldn't quite believe someone had seen him. He didn't speak right away. He swallowed thickly, his eyes beginning to shine. And then, softly, so softly, it felt like a blessing more than words, he said. You brought a smile to my face today. Her breath caught in her throat. She nodded, gently, before the emotion rising in her chest could spill over. She walked away quickly, her steps unsteady. She found herself rounding the corner of the street and leaning back against a brick wall, pressing a hand to her trembling chest. She cried then. Not loud, not dramatic, but quietly. The same quiet that had once felt empty now felt somehow relieved. She didn't know why that moment mattered so much. Only that it did. What she could not see, what she could not have known, was that God had been there. He had seen her when she sat staring at cold tea, feeling forgotten. He had walked with her down the quiet street. He had heard the whisper in her heart. He had watched her choose kindness over fear, compassion over scarcity. And in that moment, when she gave from the little she had left, when she acted from love even in her exhaustion, God smiled. A smile not of amusement or distance, but of deep, holy affection. Because even in her brokenness, even in her uncertainty, even in her weariness, her heart had remained soft, and he cherished that more than she could ever understand. That evening, as dusk unfurled across the sky like a gentle curtain, Mara returned home. The day had not been extraordinary by any worldly measure. She had not found a job. She had not solved her problems. She had not received good news or experienced a breakthrough. Life still looked the same from the outside. But inside her, there was a shift, small, delicate, almost fragile. She sat at her small wooden table again, the same place where her day had begun. But this time, the silence did not feel suffocating. It felt clearer, like the air after rain. She placed her hands around a fresh cup of tea, hot, steaming, held purposefully this time. Her thoughts moved gently, unforced. She didn't try to plan. She didn't try to fix anything. She simply sat with herself. And slowly, she closed her eyes. There were no words at first. Just breathing, just being. But then, without pushing, without searching, she whispered softly. God, was that you today? This time, there was something. Not a voice, not a flash of light. Nothing dramatic or theatrical. It was warmth. A quiet, slow warmth, blooming not around her but within her, like someone lit a candle behind her ribs. She inhaled sharply, startled by the gentleness of it. It was the kind of warmth that did not ask her to prove herself. The kind that did not demand perfection. The kind that did not arrive like a storm, but like dawn. And then, from somewhere deeper than thought, from the part of her soul that had always known how to listen, she heard. Not with her ears, but in the space where truth lives. Yes, I saw you. Her lips parted. Tears rose again, but these were not the heavy tears of despair. They were soft, full, shimmering at the surface. The warmth grew. You brought a smile to my face today. Her head bowed, and the tears fell quietly. She didn't hide them. She didn't apologize for them. She let them fall freely, like rain that had finally found open ground. Her hands trembled where they rested around the cup. She felt seen, not for her achievements, not for her resilience, not for all the days she pretended to be fine, but for her heart. God continued, not in loud declarations, but in steady, intimate knowing. My child, I know you are tired. I know the days have been long, and the nights even longer. I know you've been carrying battles you never speak about. But you have not gone unseen. Mara pressed a hand to her chest, the warmth expanding under her palm. The voice, gentle, calm, loving, went on. You think I was silent. But I was not gone. I was with you when you cried into your pillow. I was with you when you woke each day and tried again. I was with you when you felt abandoned. I never left. Her breaths came slowly, each one steadier than the last. You feared your kindness was useless. You feared your love had lost meaning. But hear me, your compassion is your strength. Your tenderness is your gift. Even when life has wounded you, your heart remains open. Mara's tears flowed, but her chest felt lighter than it had in months, maybe years. The voice continued. Today, when you saw someone suffering, you didn't turn away. You gave from what little you had. Not for praise, not for recognition, but because your heart knew what love was. She remembered the old man's eyes. The way his voice shook when he said she'd brought him a smile. It had seemed like such a small gesture. But now, she understood. When you cared for him, you cared for me. Her breath caught. Whatever you do for the least among you, God whispered, you do for me. The words settled deep. She had spent months wondering if she was failing God. If she was disappointing him. If he had turned away because she had become weak or afraid or uncertain. But now, she saw the truth. He had never asked her to be unbreakable. He had only asked her to remain loving. And she had, even in her emptiness, even in her exhaustion, even in her quiet sorrow, she had continued to care. The warmth grew fuller, wrapping her like an embrace she had longed for without knowing how to ask. You have not failed, God said. You have not fallen behind. You have not lost my favor. You are still mine, and I am still here. Her heart broke, this time in the most beautiful way possible. It broke open. She laid her head down on her folded arms atop the table and let herself cry, soft, grateful, releasing tears. Tears that washed away months of silent heaviness. The room remained quiet, but the quiet was no longer empty. It was holy. After a long while, she lifted her head. The world around her looked the same, but she did not. Something was different now, subtle but profound. She felt held. She felt remembered. She felt known. And most importantly, she felt loved, not because she was strong, not because she was accomplishing, not because she was cheerful or composed, but simply because she was his. The next morning when she woke, her problems were still there. The future was still uncertain. The road ahead was still long. But she walked with a different spirit. There was light in her step, quiet, steady, genuine. She didn't need everything to be solved at once. She didn't need to rush. She didn't need to prove herself. She simply needed to keep living with kindness. Because now she knew something she hadn't known before. Her smallest acts of love were seen. Her silent endurance was seen. Her tenderness, even when tired, was seen. And every day she chose love. God smiled. Not because she was perfect. Not because she was unbroken. But because she was his child, and her heart was still open. And that was enough. It had always been enough.